An anchor is something that you can use to help you to connect with a fundamental truth, such as you being a master of creation in your reality. Now, a few videos back, I made a video on how I use my shades to ultimately connect me with my future self, and how I use these shades as an anchor to connect me to the version of myself that has it all, and how you can use anchors to essentially materialize, to connect with that person that has a thing that you desire. Okay. Now, there were a lot of questions about that and a lot of statements regarding anchors. So it was a matter of me using that video to essentially plant a seed. Right. And so now I'm going to get more into details as far as what an anchor is, and the reality that you have a lot more anchors that you use throughout your life. Okay. So let's get into what is an anchor. Okay. So an anchor, and how you can use it and how you're already using it and really don't realize it. Right. So an anchor really basically keeps you grounded, right? When we think about a normal anchor on a ship, it usually is a hook, that is connected to a big chain that's essentially tied to a ship or a boat, and it's thrown off the boat or a ship into the water where it makes contact with the earth, with the ground, and it essentially keeps that ship in place. So what we're talking about is keeping you in place with a certain frequency. And so I use the example of, say, jewelry, right? I may have spelt that wrong. Bear with me. So jewelry, right? When people tend to make, say, a good amount of money, they have a goal to make, say, $1 million, and they make that $1 million, or they find themselves at a place where they are in the frequency of millions or serious like financial stability. They may go out and they may buy, say, a watch, right? Men like to buy a watch. Usually it's a Rolex. Okay. A Rolex watch usually signifies some level of, security, or some level of not security, but stature, right? That you've made it, right? Not everybody can go and buy a Rolex, even though I wonder why they buy them in the first place. But this is exactly why they buy them. They don't buy Rolexes simply because they're the best watch in the world, or they have the most highest or most complicated tech, right? They don't buy it for the time, because everybody has a cell phone, which tells them their time. Okay. So really, a Rolex is about it being an anchor. Okay. That's essentially what the brand is. And it is anchoring them to money. Okay. Success. That's why people buy Rolex, is because they are tethering themselves to a physical thing that represents success, that represents money, millionaire status, okay, financial freedom. That's why people buy the Rolex. So as we get into all the other things, right, that can be anchors, like let's say, for example, my shades. My shades are a symbol. They are an example of me connecting with my future self, with the version of myself that allows me to dial in, to channel, right, to gain this access to wisdom to share with you, right, to dial in to the version of myself that I know I am meant to be, to dial into my purpose, okay, to dial into my destiny. This is what I use my shades for. Now, when it comes to you have to think of your anchor as almost like a plug and an outlet. Okay. One means nothing by itself, but together something gets plugged in and it is more useful. Okay. This is how you have to look at it. You also have to look at your anchor as a bridge connecting one point to another. All right. So, for example, if love circles are here and your desire is here. Okay. And this is often what we find and feel it looks like, right? We feel like we are isolated and we feel so far away and so distant from that desire, that thing that we want, that lifestyle, that way of existing, all of that, that future self. We feel like it's a whole different person, but really it is you, right? So when you have this feeling here, right, this experience here, essentially, the anchor acts as the bridge. Okay. The anchor acts as the bridge that connects your desire to you in this present moment. All right. So for me, the anchor is my shades. Okay. Now, what I want you to understand is that the anchor is simply just a medium. Okay. Now, the anchor itself has no power, but it is the resonance, right? How you resonate with that thing, something about it that allows you to access your own power. Okay. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about something that just resonates with you, that just hits right for you, that allows you to just simply tap into your power by way of using that anchor, using that bridge, right? Using that plug. Okay. The anchor is the plug. And then essentially the desire is the outlet. So once you plug that in, then essentially it brings life to you. Okay. So let's get into some examples of anchors that you're just not simply aware of. Okay. Now, when I made my video on my shades being an anchor, somebody had jokes about, oh, I could see that being an anchor for somebody who wants to go skiing. And then they started to talk about the fact that, a physical thing probably shouldn't be an anchor, but honesty, like a personality trait or a characteristic or a, attribute should be somebody's anchor. This is true, right? But what I want you to understand is just because I'm using something physical doesn't mean that it's not valuable. It doesn't mean that it's something bad. Okay. So you have to understand that you're just simply using it. And most times this is just out of fun. This is just out of enjoyment. This is just out of just going with the flow of life. And, yes, you are taking this journey from a very serious point of view as to wanting to align with yourself and the universe, right? But when you get so serious that you're not having fun, that you're not dressing in the way you want to dress, that you're not enjoying certain aspects of life, especially the physical and the materialistic, then you kind of miss the point. All right. It's not to be so serious that you are the absent, right? That you are just absent of joy, excitement, and just really recognizing the beauty of all things, even the materialistic things. So a lot of this should be handled with grace, fun, and really just not taking yourself so damn serious. Okay. So now let's get into different anchors. All right. Because this is very important. Very important. I want you to see how significant anchors are already in your life and you haven't even realized it. When I made the video on my shades being an anchor, people often don't associate that. So they didn't find the connection, right? And that was my bad because I should have elaborated more. And this is why I'm making this video. So anchor, an anchor is, for example, books, right? Videos. When you read a book, when you watch a video on a certain topic, say this video here, essentially, this is an anchor. It is an anchor to wisdom. Here's the thing. The books and the videos that you're reading and watching, it's nothing new, really. It's something new as far as your conscious mind goes when you're reading this book or watching this video. But the reality is, the wisdom is it's true. Like it's a universal law of or universal truth. Okay. You already know this stuff. Okay. Your higher self already knows everything that you find in a book or in any video. This is why I say, like, I'm not your guru, right? Seth Guru is not your guru, right? Osho is not your guru, right? Jesus is not your guru. The true guru is you, your future self, trying to give you the insight and the wisdom to come along in your journey to be that version of you. So when we talk about the future self, when we talk about quantum physics, quantum, the quantum realm, the quantum field, we're essentially really getting into the understanding that you are an infinite being who is experiencing infinite realities at one time. Okay. And because you are an infinite being, just like God is an infinite being, right? And you are an expression of that, then you are essentially able to access all of these realities, recognizing that truth is a matter of point of view. It's not really a matter of fact or fiction, right? It's not really a matter of whether or not it can be proven or disproved, right? It's just simply a matter of, do you believe it or not? Does it resonate with you? Okay, because you can have two people who can have completely opposing belief systems, but yet it works for them. That proves my point, right? That it's not about the belief system. It's not about the thing. The fact is, it's all true. Okay. Now that may be a lot to handle, but just push that aside for a little bit and let's get more into different types of anchors. All right. Now, again, I mentioned already just now teachers, right? People use teachers as an anchor, mentors as an anchor. Okay. But really, they're just mediums by which they share a fundamental truth that, you already know. You just need somebody to remind you, to guide you to remembering that truth. Okay. Now, I'm trying to think of another one. Let's go with money. Okay. Money is a powerful anchor because we've given money such a, in this world, especially currently, we've given money so much power and so much significance. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because it's the currency of the world, so to speak, right? Pun intended, right? Currency, right? Which means current, which means, frequency, or, you can think in terms of electricity, right? But money is a anchor for essentially abundance. Okay. It's an anchor for the fact that you have and you are everything. Okay. It is, because we feel like if I have enough money, then I can get anything that I want, that I can get everything that I want, that I can have security. I'm terrible at spelling that word. That you can have security, or let's say stability. Okay. Now, these are things that already exist, right? Because even if you're broke and you don't have money, guess what? Nothing really happens to you. I mean, yeah, you may get evicted. Yeah, your car may get repossessed, but you can always get those things back. So it really doesn't threaten you along this spiritual journey and awakening to who you are. You see? Now, let's see. Another one would be, this is a good one. Lover or partner. A lover or partner. That is an anchor. Believe it or not, that person, that relationship is anchoring you in something that is already true, but you just need them to pull it out of you. Okay. Which is the fact that you are love. You are already love. The most important person that is supposed to and should be giving you the love that you desire is you. Okay. The self. But sometimes we need help. We need support. We need to remember what that feels like. This feeling of unconditional love that we all yearn from other people, right? Especially our significant other. We always have to remember that, especially in relationships, is very important because we get it lost and we get it twisted as far as me wanting to be in a relationship, right? I want to feel loved. Well, really, you want to feel loved because you're not accessing in that love for yourself. You're not really putting in motion or putting in the practice of being, right, the love that you are. You're not really showing that love to yourself. So here's the thing. When we recognize that all of these things, right, when we recognize that when we tap into being all these things, right, essentially, we then attract these things. That's the trick. So we can use an anchor to inspire, to initiate, to facilitate the feeling of having these things. But eventually, we have to take ownership of being these things, recognizing our own divine wisdom and truth, recognizing that really we are stable. Okay. Everything will be okay. Recognizing that you are love. When you understand that you are pure and divine love, guess what happens? You attract a love, right? The love of your life, an amazing partner. When you recognize that you are already stable, you attract money. When you recognize, right, when they say, when the student is ready, the teacher comes, because the student recognizes that wisdom is there. All right. And that's when they attract the teacher. That's when they attract the perfect mentor. You see? So the anchor is a way of kind of hacking the system a little bit. And this is why I refer to, using the future self frequency, because essentially that's what we're doing. When we get into really aligning with our future self, right? Basically the embodiment, right? When we embody, right, by doing, the things that that person or that version of yourself is doing, whether it be, how they dress, how they speak, right? How they walk, how they eat, okay? The activities they do, whether it be, fitness, yoga, the actions, especially as it relates to the main things that you want in life, that you desire in life. When you embody all these things, right? And you start with the easiest, most simple thing. So if it's a matter of, hey, I can easily dress like that person, the dress will have you feeling, okay, have you feeling aligned with that beingness. And so it begins to create a shift in your frequency. And then that's when you attract the many things on your list of, desires. You see? So you have to really understand that everything really is an anchor in this world. We tend to get so focused on things being separated, right? All the spiritual people, the spiritual, and it's like versus the physical, when that's not truth. Okay. There is no separation here. They are essentially expressions of the same thing. The spiritual and the physical are essentially one thing. So when we talk about the physical, we're talking about the material, right? The materialistic stuff, you know, my shades. If they represent to me kindness, honesty, integrity, having fun, joy, if that's what these do for me, then, well, I'm going to wear them to bring my physical in alignment with the spiritual, you know? And that's the same thing that applies to you. So if you really authentically feel like, hey, me getting that, G-Wagon, right? The G-Wagon Benz, which I think is absolutely an ugly vehicle, but some people want to get that. If you think authentically, if I get me a G-Wagon Benz, then I'm going to align with an aspect of myself that I desire to be, right? It might be a stretch, but hey, you have to be truly authentic with yourself. And you have to ask yourself, like I said before, what do you want? And what does that mean as far as what you truly desire? Okay. So you may want a G-Wagon Benz, but from this G-Wagon Benz, what does that represent as far as your desire to have one? Maybe you assume when you have a G-Wagon Benz, that means people will look at you as successful, right? And this is what we mentioned when it came to the Rolex. Okay. People do the same thing with G-Wagons. They say, hey, if I get a G-Wagon, then I've made it. That works for them. It works for some people. Some people would just put some deeper in debt and they just get more and more broke and poor. But you really have to align with the desire, and you really have to align with what it is that you're doing, to embody that future version of yourself. If it's just simply getting that G-Wagon, okay, and you're not being in the practice of especially the activities and the actions of the person, the version of you that has it all, if you're not aligning with those things, then guess what? You're going to get the G-Wagon, but then your actions, you're not embodying the alignment of your future self, okay? You're not aligning with that frequency. So then that's going to result in you being in debt, okay? Because it's coming from more of the ego, okay? Not consciousness. So this is all we're all talking about here is being led by consciousness, right? The pure aspects of who you are and tapping into that, dialing into that, you see? So when you dial into that, you can you can play around and have, shades on when you make your videos. You can, wear a cape, if you want to. You can, buy yourself a trinket or something that signals or plug you in to the frequency, of that desire, and that's what I mentioned before about being the plug. All right. The plug in the outlet. So the thing is the plug. Okay. And it is plugging you into the frequency. And that's essentially what anchors are. So, everything you use, everything you have, everything that we can go down a list of everything that you have and use and why it's an anchor. Society is an anchor. Your job is an anchor. Again, your relationships are an anchor. Everything essentially is an anchor to align you with the ultimate desire that you want, or it should be. For many of us, it's an anchor that locks us into what we were told that we should want. But it isn't really tapped into what we truly desire. So it's up to you, though, to get really pure and to get really clear about what it is that you desire for yourself, you know? And usually the older you are, the better you get at it. I find that this generation is is more clear about what they desire, almost to a point where they're willing to negate and and let go of basic what we may consider to be responsibilities, right? And they just be like, no, I don't want to do that. And hey, I'm not mad at that, right? Because I think this generation is making up for lost time. We should be more evolved in who we are and what we desire and, really achieving happiness and fulfillment. So you have to get clear and you have to ask yourself about every area of your life, whether it be your health, right? Your job, your relationship, your money, okay? Lifestyle. Look at all these areas in your life. You may have another one, which is very important. People take it for granted. Your hobbies, right? Hobbies, passions. As far as I'm concerned, hobby, passion should be your job. That's what I think. That's how I live my life is like I align my hobbies and passions so that way it'll be my job and it'll make my money and it'll create a certain lifestyle. It'll help me in my relationships, right? And I make sure my health, right, is focused on being the best so I can live out my passion. You see, but that's me. Everybody functions a little bit differently. They have it prioritized differently. But these essentially are the major categories we all think about, right? We all focus on and we all should be clear about in life, So you got to get clear about these areas of your life. So take a moment, if not once, but every single day, just sit, especially in your lunch break, while you're chilling instead of scrolling, just ask yourself some questions like, hey, what do I really desire out of all this? What really aligns with who I am and who I want to be? Because a lot of people want to be something. They desire something. They wish they can do this and do that and do that. And then they hand it off and say, well, that person's different. That person can do it and I can't. That's bull. If they can do it, if you desire to do it, then you most certainly are supposed to do it. Okay. This is what the future self frequency is about. That is your code. That is your path. That is your lantern, right? That is your guide. That is the thing that is leading you to your desired future self. So you have to go and ask yourself the questions. What do I want when it comes to my job? What do I truly desire when it comes to my relationship? What do I desire when it comes to money? What do I, and then you just ask yourself, what, right? What do you desire? And then the question, after you keep asking that, okay, and you get clear, what do you desire? Things will start to make sense a little bit, okay? Just like I started to show you arrows on how I think about my life and how I arrange all these things and why I do certain things, you'll start to do the same thing, You'll start to say, well, my relationship is most important to me, So you'll start to say, well, let me get healthier from my relationship, or let me make my relationship healthier, right? Let me focus on my relationship because if I have a good partner or good team, then I could get healthy. Then we can create more money. Then we can create an amazing lifestyle, right? If you say, hey, I need to get my money right first, if I get my money right, then it'll allow me to maybe hire a coach, right? To get my health right. It'll allow me to get some, relationship or marriage therapy, counseling to get my relationship right. So you start to like see all these different things, but you have to get clear. Okay. You have to practice self-awareness. When you do that, then when you start like playing around with the anchors, right? When you start saying, hey, yo, I'm trying to be happy. My goal is to be positive, to play, have fun. Then you start to find these ways of doing that, right? You put decorations, you put things in your car, stickers, you just start having fun in life and everything becomes a reminder of the future version of yourself that you are actually aligning with in this present moment. They become that. You become that. You bring that future self to the present. Okay. That is what the future self frequency is about. That is what the journal is going to support you in discovering, because the journal is designed to create a dialogue between your future self and the now, right? Because if your future self is communicating to you, which it always is by way of your passions, right? By way of your desires, that's what is communicating to you through these, all right? But when you practice writing in this journal and having a dialogue and communication with your future self, then it becomes something that is easier, right? Just way simpler, and something that you don't have to like think about as far as a distant person that you will never be. It's almost like when we talk about manifestation and we talk about affirmations, there's some basic laws, right? When you say your affirmations, don't say I will, right? I will achieve, I will make $1 million, because will doesn't state when it happens. It doesn't claim it as now in the present moment. It doesn't lock you into the beingness of it. But if you say I am, right? Or I create, or I have created, right? Or simply I am a millionaire, or I am rich. It locks you into the mindset of that person. So when you get into using your journal, reading the book, you start to understand how that works. And so that's all I wanted to share with you today. All these things are mediums by which you connect with your true self. Mediums by which you essentially achieve your enlightenment. Okay? Enlightenment is not the same for everybody. Enlightenment doesn't just look like meditating in the retreat for, 23 hours a day. It just simply looks like happiness. It just simply looks like joy. Okay? So play around, use these anchors. All right? It's fun. It's been fun for me. I've been having a good time with it. So I invite you to do that too, because though this journey, like I said before, there should be a level of intention, and usually intention involves being serious for a lot of people, but fun is also a big factor in that. So have fun. All right. Now, you can get these books at futureselffrequency.com. If you're not ready to purchase these books yet, you can get this version of the Future Self Frequency. This is called the Essence Edition. When you go to drabundant.com, subscribe to my daily newsletter, you'll get a free PDF of this and also a free PDF of the first chapter of this version, which is the Deluxe Transformation Edition. All right. Thank you once again. Peace and abundance always.